Keir Starmer just broke down on live television, and it wasn't because of a tough interview. It was because Rayner just exposed one of the biggest corruption scandals Britain has ever seen. This is the kind of story the establishment will do everything to bury. But I'm going to lay it all out for you. Because what just happened doesn't just threaten Starmer's career, it could bring down the entire political system as we know it. Keir Starmer's carefully polished image has finally cracked, and it happened in the most spectacular fashion possible. For years, Starmer sold himself as Mr. Integrity, the man who would clean up politics after the chaos of the Boris Johnson years. He promised to restore trust, restore honesty, and restore dignity to Westminster. But Rayner just tore that mask right off in front of the entire country. And what she revealed has sent shockwaves through British politics. Forget about the polite, scripted version of events you'll get from the BBC. Forget about the watered-down analysis from the broadsheets. What Rayner exposed is not just a political embarrassment, it's a full-blown scandal that shows just how rotten the system has become. Let's break this down. For weeks, there had been whispers about dodgy contracts, shadowy donors, and backroom deals tied to key figures in the Labour leadership. But no one in Westminster had the courage to say it out loud. No one, that is, except Rayner. In a blistering statement that felt more like a courtroom indictment than a political speech, Rayner laid out a timeline of backroom lobbying that would make even the most cynical observer sit up straight. She named names, she listed dates, she connected the dots in a way that no one could ignore. And then she turned the spotlight on Keir Starmer himself, asking the question everyone was too afraid to ask. How much did he know, and when did he know it? This wasn't just a casual accusation. Rayner produced documents, leaked emails, internal memos, and records that allegedly show senior Labour figures signing off on deals that benefited their political allies while leaving ordinary taxpayers to pick up the bill. And if you think this is just another boring Westminster bubble story, think again. The money involved runs into the tens of millions. Public funds, meant for rebuilding crumbling schools and repairing hospitals, allegedly diverted into projects linked to party donors and private contractors with close ties to the leadership. Keir Starmer's reaction told you everything you needed to know. This wasn't the calm, unflappable barrister we're used to seeing. This was a man visibly shaken, stumbling over his words, trying desperately to stick to a prepared line, but losing control of the narrative. Reporters in the room said his face went pale when Rayner dropped the final bombshell. That she had handed over the entire file to the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority and was calling for a full investigation. Think about how rare this is. Most politicians, when faced with a scandal, go into bunker mode. They issue a carefully worded statement, deny everything, and wait for the story to die. Rayner didn't do that. She went nuclear. She didn't just expose the scandal, she dragged it into the daylight, named the players involved, and demanded accountability in a way that left Starmer nowhere to hide. And here's the part that should terrify the establishment. The public is listening. Within hours, clips of Rayner's speech were trending across social media. Hashtags demanding transparency were going viral. Ordinary people, the same voters who have been tuning out of politics for years, were suddenly paying attention again. And what they saw was not a confident Prime Minister in waiting, calmly leading his party. They saw a man cornered, defensive, and completely unprepared for the storm that just hit him. The timing makes this story even more explosive. Labour is already struggling in the polls. Their majority looks less like a mandate and more like a fluke caused by Conservative implosion. And now, right when Starmer needed to project strength and stability, the deputy leader he once relied on has turned into his most dangerous critic. This isn't just a political headache. This is an existential crisis for Starmer's leadership. If he can't contain this scandal, he risks losing control of his own party. But here's what makes this moment historic. Rayner isn't just speaking for herself. She's tapping into a much deeper anger that has been simmering across the country. People are fed up with a system that punishes the powerless for minor mistakes, but lets the powerful get away with corruption on an industrial scale. They're sick of being told to tighten their belts while politicians and their friends profit behind closed doors. And Rayner, with her working-class background and straight-talking style, is the perfect messenger for that rage. What happens next could decide the future of British politics. Will Starmer survive this scandal by sacrificing a few scapegoats and hoping the story fades? Or will this snowball into a full-blown reckoning that forces a change at the very top? One thing is clear. The days of Keir Starmer coasting on a carefully managed reputation are over. The mask has slipped, the cracks are showing, and Rayner just proved she's willing to take the fight right to the heart of power. The fallout from Rayner's revelations has been nothing short of political carnage. Within hours of her statement, Labour HQ went into full-blown crisis mode. Phones were ringing off the hook, advisors were summoned to emergency meetings, and press officers scrambled to put together a narrative that could calm the storm. But here's the thing, the usual tricks aren't working this time. Leaks from inside the party suggest that even Starmer's closest allies were blindsided by how comprehensive Rayner's evidence was. She didn't just throw out accusations, she brought receipts, and the receipts are damning. We're talking about detailed financial records, meeting minutes, even WhatsApp messages that allegedly show senior party figures discussing how to keep donors happy while quietly shelving key manifesto promises. It's the kind of paper trail that makes denials look ridiculous. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Instead of addressing the allegations head-on, the Labour leadership appears to be doing what every panicked establishment does when cornered: attack the messenger. Overnight, friendly columnists started running stories questioning Rayner's motives, implying she was bitter, disloyal, or plotting a leadership coup. Anonymous briefings began to appear in the press, suggesting that her personal life would soon be under scrutiny. If you think that's a coincidence, think again. This is textbook political damage control. Smear the whistleblower, muddy the waters, and hope the public loses interest. But if Labour thought Angela Rayner would back down, they seriously miscalculated. By morning, she was back in front of cameras, doubling down, calling the attempts to discredit her pathetic, and accusing the leadership of trying to distract from the real issue: public money being misused. The irony is delicious. This is the same Keir Starmer who made his name as a crusading lawyer, the man who told the public he'd clean up politics, now accused of presiding over one of the dirtiest episodes in recent memory. It's like watching the sheriff get caught robbing the bank he swore to protect. And the public can smell the hypocrisy. Polling overnight showed a sharp drop in trust for Starmer's leadership, with nearly half of Labour voters saying they wanted a full independent inquiry. That's not just bad news. That's catastrophic for a leader who has built his entire brand on integrity. Meanwhile, Westminster is in full gossip overdrive. MPs are openly whispering about whether Starmer can survive this if the scandal drags on. Some are already manoeuvring for position, preparing for what they see as an inevitable leadership challenge if his numbers continue to collapse. Remember, politics abhors a vacuum, and nothing creates a vacuum faster than a weakened leader. One senior backbencher reportedly told colleagues that this feels like the beginning of the end. And here's where it gets truly dangerous for Starmer. Rayner still commands deep respect among the party's grassroots members. If this turns into a power struggle between her and the party establishment, she's not going to be standing alone. She'll have trade unions, activists, and a whole army of ordinary members rallying behind her. And it's not just a Labour problem anymore. This scandal is spreading like wildfire across the entire political class. Questions are now being raised about whether similar donor-linked deals were signed off by local councils and devolved administrations. Journalists are digging through procurement records, looking for patterns, and every new revelation keeps the story alive for another news cycle. This isn't a one-day scandal. This is the kind of slow-burn crisis that chips away at public confidence day after day until something snaps. What makes this even more dangerous is that Rayner has framed this not as a party dispute, but as a battle for the soul of British politics. She's saying what millions of disillusioned voters have been thinking for years, that the system is rigged, that ordinary people get punished for small mistakes, while the powerful play by a different set of rules. And because she's not a polished career politician, because she speaks in plain language and doesn't hide her anger, her message is cutting through. Clips of her speeches are being shared not just by left-wing activists, but by ordinary voters, by small business owners, even by lifelong Conservative supporters who are sick of corruption wherever it comes from. Inside Downing Street, you can almost hear the champagne corks popping. The Tories might be in disarray, but they know a gift when they see one. Government ministers are already seizing on this scandal to paint Labour as just as corrupt as the Conservatives, maybe even worse. It's a devastating narrative for a party that campaigned on being the clean hands alternative. And here's the kicker. If this story drags into the next parliamentary session, you can bet Rishi Sunak and his team will weaponise it at every opportunity. Prime Minister's questions will turn into a bloodbath. Starmer will be on the defensive week after week, forced to explain why his own deputy is accusing him of covering up corruption. But let's zoom out, because this isn't just about Keir Starmer's career. This is about whether the Labour Party has the courage to confront corruption in its own ranks, or whether it will close ranks and pretend nothing happened. It's about whether ordinary people still have a voice in a political system that seems designed to protect the powerful. And it's about whether Angela Rayner has just triggered the kind of reckoning that could transform British politics forever. The establishment can try to shut her up. They can smear her, sideline her, even try to force her out of the party. But every move they make just proves her point, that the system is more interested in protecting itself than in delivering justice. By the third day, this scandal had morphed from a political headache into a full-scale national crisis. What started as Angela Rayner's bombshell revelation has now triggered an avalanche of leaks, whistleblowers, and anonymous sources who clearly smell blood in the water. Every major newspaper, from The Guardian to The Telegraph, is running front-page stories about the alleged misuse of public funds. Investigative journalists are digging up contracts, cross-checking donor lists, and tracing money flows like detectives piecing together a crime scene. And the picture that's emerging is devastating, not just for Keir Starmer, but for everyone who thought they could keep these secrets buried. The pressure inside Westminster is now unbearable. Multiple Labour MPs have reportedly confronted Starmer behind closed doors, demanding he address the allegations head-on. Some have even hinted that they might resign the whip if there isn't a full and transparent inquiry. Think about how serious that is. We're talking about members of his own party, threatening to walk away from the leadership at the very moment he needs unity most. According to leaks from the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting, Starmer looked visibly rattled, his voice shaking as he promised swift action and insisted he had nothing to hide. But the room, by all accounts, was ice cold. One MP was overheard telling a colleague, "If he thinks this is going away, he's delusional." And it's not just members of Parliament. The unions, the lifeblood of Labour's grassroots operation, are starting to turn. Several union leaders have publicly backed Rayner's call for an independent investigation, warning that trust between the leadership and the membership is at breaking point. That's huge. Union support isn't just symbolic, it's practical power. It means money, campaign resources, boots on the ground during elections. Lose that, and you lose the very machinery that keeps the party alive. Starmer knows this, which is why his team is now frantically trying to reassure union bosses behind the scenes. But the damage might already be done. Meanwhile, the media circus has reached fever pitch. Every hour, new revelations drop a leaked email here, a whistleblower testimony there, each one adding fuel to the fire. News channels are running split-screen coverage. On one side, clips of Starmer looking grim-faced and defensive. On the other, Angela Rayner calmly, methodically repeating her demand for justice. And here's the killer: the public believes her. Polling shows that a majority of voters think Rayner is telling the truth, and that there should be a criminal investigation into the alleged corruption. That's not just a PR disaster, that's a legitimacy crisis. When the public thinks their Prime Minister-in-waiting might be covering up corruption, it's game over for the Mr. Integrity brand. Inside Labour HQ, panic is giving way to open warfare. Factions are forming. Some senior figures want Starmer to sack anyone implicated in the scandal immediately, to cauterise the wound before it spreads further. Others warn that firing too many people at once would look like an admission of guilt and plunge the party into chaos. And then there are those whispering about a plan B, a contingency plan for what happens if Starmer himself becomes politically untenable. Angela Rayner's name is being floated, not just as the whistleblower who blew the doors off this scandal, but as a potential successor who could clean house and restore the party's reputation. And here's where things get truly cinematic. Late-night reports emerged that the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner has officially launched an investigation. That means subpoenas, document seizures, witness interviews. The whole machinery of accountability is about to grind into motion. If those investigators find that public money was misused, it's not just a political problem anymore. It becomes a legal one. And legal problems don't get solved with slick PR lines or carefully worded statements. They end with resignations, suspensions, sometimes even prosecutions. Keir Starmer is now in an impossible position. If he fights this, he risks looking like he's obstructing justice. If he cooperates fully, he risks incriminating people at the very top of his team, possibly even himself. Either way, his authority is crumbling. Cabinet ministers are reportedly avoiding him, worried about getting dragged down with the sinking ship. Briefings to the press have turned openly hostile, with anonymous Labour sources calling the situation untenable and worse than anything we faced under Corbyn. Think about that. The Labour right spent years saying Jeremy Corbyn was unelectable because of scandal and division. Now their supposedly safe pair of hands is at the centre of an even bigger meltdown. And then there's Rayner. Every time Starmer tries to change the subject, she comes back with more evidence, more documents, more witnesses willing to speak out. It's relentless. And the more the leadership tries to frame this as an internal dispute, the more Rayner frames it as a fight for democracy itself. This isn't about factions, she told reporters. This is about whether the public can trust any of us to do the right thing with their money. If we can't answer that question, we have no right to ask for their votes. It's a line that will haunt Starmer for the rest of his career. The mood across the country is shifting. What began as a scandal confined to the Westminster bubble is now a national conversation about trust, honesty, and whether politics is fundamentally broken. Pundits are openly speculating about a leadership challenge before the next election. Social media is on fire, with hashtags like #StarmerResign and #Rayner for leader trending simultaneously. You can feel the energy building, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Something big is coming, and everyone knows it. By the end of the week, Westminster felt less like a parliament and more like a pressure cooker about to explode. The scandal had swallowed everything. Policy announcements, media spin, even Prime Minister's questions. Every conversation, every headline, every late-night WhatsApp message among MPs circled back to one question. Could Keir Starmer survive? The answer was shifting by the hour, and for the first time since he took over as Labour leader, the sense of inevitability around him had shattered. What had once seemed like a steady march toward number 10 now looked like a slow-motion collapse. Angela Rayner's crusade had completely rewritten the political script. The atmosphere inside the Labour Party was electric, almost revolutionary. Whips reported that backbench MPs were refusing to toe the line, openly defying leadership instructions in Commons votes and calling for emergency meetings. Constituency parties began passing motions demanding transparency and threatening to withhold support if the scandal wasn't fully investigated. Local councillors started resigning live on air, accusing the leadership of covering up corruption. The party's carefully constructed image of unity disintegrated overnight. One veteran Labour MP described the situation as worse than the expenses scandal, worse than Partygate. This is a crisis of credibility, and when you've lost credibility, you've lost everything. Keir Starmer attempted to seize back control with a televised address, hoping to draw a line under the crisis. It was meant to be a moment of strength, a leader speaking directly to the nation, projecting calm authority. But it backfired spectacularly. Viewers watched as Starmer stumbled through a statement that sounded more like a legal defence than a heartfelt appeal. His refusal to answer direct questions only made him look evasive, and when he walked off stage without taking media questions, the backlash was instant. Social media lit up with clips of the address, many set to ominous music or captioned with lines like, "The end is near." Far from calming the storm, Starmer had just poured petrol on the fire. And then came the real gut punch. Late that evening, a fresh batch of leaked documents hit the front pages, this time implicating senior advisors in approving questionable contracts, even after internal warnings had been raised. These weren't vague allegations. These were smoking gun memos with signatures, timestamps, and email chains that showed exactly who knew what and when. The story was now impossible to spin. The next morning, broadcasters were openly using the word cover-up, and editorial pages that had once been sympathetic to Starmer were calling for resignations. By noon, rumours swirled that several shadow cabinet ministers were preparing to walk out if Starmer didn't act. The term shadow cabinet coup started appearing on news tickers. Angela Rayner, meanwhile, was everywhere. Morning TV, radio interviews, press conferences. Her message was simple and devastating. This is not about personalities. This is about honesty. If we can't hold ourselves to the standards we demand of others, then we have no business asking the country to trust us with power. It was the kind of statement that cut through the noise because it sounded like what millions of people were already thinking. And it didn't hurt that Rayner seemed calm, collected, even statesmanlike, while Starmer appeared increasingly defensive and isolated. By the weekend, the situation had escalated into open rebellion. Dozens of Labour MPs signed a public letter calling for a full independent inquiry and hinting that Starmer's position would be untenable if he refused. Trade unions began pulling funding from upcoming by-election campaigns, signalling that they were no longer willing to bankroll a leadership they considered compromised. Pollsters reported the biggest single-week drop in Labour's ratings since Starmer took office, with some even suggesting that if a general election were held tomorrow, Labour might lose its majority entirely. The idea of Starmer as the safe, electable choice was evaporating before the country's eyes. And then came the moment that will be replayed in political documentaries for years to come. In a dramatic late-night development, the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner announced that the investigation would be widened to include Starmer's own role in authorising the disputed contracts. That was the final straw. Cameras caught Starmer leaving Labour HQ looking grim and refusing to answer shouted questions from reporters. Inside, his inner circle reportedly debated whether he should resign before being forced out. The symbolism was undeniable. The man who once promised to restore trust to politics, now facing the very same accountability process he had championed for others.